Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Top military officials are warning that what held last time, the military firewall blocking Donald Trump's attempted coup, might not hold again. In a new opinion piece in the Washington Post, three former top military strategists, Major General Paul Eaton, who commanded operations to train Iraqi troops during Operation Iraqi Freedom, Major General Antonio Taguba, who, of course, authored the somewhat infamous internal report on abuse of detainees held at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, and Brigadier General Stephen Anderson, who served directly under General David Petraeus, warned, quote, "We are increasingly concerned about the aftermath of the 2024 presidential election and the potential for lethal chaos inside our military, which would put all Americans at severe risk. In short, we are chilled to our bones at the thought of a coup succeeding next time." I'm going to talk to Major General Paul Eaton in just a moment. But as those former top military leaders warn in that new piece I quoted at the top, it's not a status quo that we can just kind of take for granted going forward. I quote again. On January 6th, a disturbing number of veterans and active duty members of the military took part in the attack on the Capitol. More than 1 in 10 of those charged in the attacks had a service record. A group of 124 retired military officials under the name Flag Officers for America released a letter echoing Donald Trump's false attacks on legitimacy of our elections. The authors of the op-ed go on to write, quote, "The potential for a total breakdown of the chain of command along partisan lines from the top of the chain to the squad level is significant should another insurrection occur. The idea of rogue units organizing among themselves to support the, quote, rightful commander-in-chief cannot be dismissed." Major General Paul Eaton served in the U.S. Army for 33 years, including during the Iraq War. He co-wrote that opinion piece with 2 other retired generals, and he joins me now. General, I wonder if you could just talk about the origins of this piece and why you felt the need to write it, how it came about, what precipitated it.
Oh, great to be here, and thank you very much, Chris. So the piece was designed to correct or at least to address a failure to imagine. The Republican Party has been imagining pretty well. The January 6th insurrection was unimaginable to me until I watched it unfold on various news outlets. And the intent of the op-ed was to cause folks to consider that intelligent people are doing after-action reviews on why 6th January failed and what they can do to correct the failure, the points of failure. So you went through a series of steps that we read and began to help trigger the op-ed. 3 governors dispute who the commander-in-chief of their National Guards are. That's another opportunity that we have for command failure and command lack of understanding of how the chain of command works. So with the indications and warnings that you laid out, with the fact that the Republican Party has gone to great lengths to infect America with this question of electoral suitability, with the fact that the election of 2020 was a fraud, and we have 39% of the GOP who do not accept that President Biden is the duly elected president. We have 17% of the GOP who feel that violence to correct that situation is appropriate. So we wrote this op-ed to correct that failure of imagination, that it can happen, that Americans are going after it right now and offered mitigating opportunities to buy down the risk.
Yeah, I want to read some of the prescriptions you have. And I think before I get to that, just one more follow-up question about this. I mean, my read on what happened when you read about what was happening at the Pentagon and with Esper and then Milley is that, again, at some level, the fundamental small d democratic cultural ethos of the armed forces, at least at the top levels, really did hold, right? That, I mean, at a deep level, the oath to the Constitution and the notion that this is not what the armed forces should ever do, is to interfere in an election, that held. I think your concern, though, is that could be eroded with sustained attempts by the ex-president and his sort of facilitators to eat into that belief, at least among folks that are in the armed forces, which of course is 1.5 million people or whatever.
Indeed, there is an active movement right now on the part of the GOP to infect the armed forces of the United States with doubt that the election process is just not what we expect it to be, to insert doubt that we are conducting fair and elegantly delivered elections. So there will be opportunities for good Americans to conclude that the election may not have produced results that are consistent with what they want, and
Right.
will listen. And that we've just got to get after that particular threat.
Yeah, you're right here. The Pentagon should immediately order a civics review for all members, uniformed and civilian, on the Constitution, electoral integrity. There must also be a review of the laws of war, how to identify and deal with illegal orders, and it must reinforce unity of command to make perfectly clear to every member of the Defense Department whom they answer to. No service member should say they didn't understand whom to take orders from during a worst-case scenario. Obviously, it's 33 years in the U.S. Armed Forces as a general. You do a lot of planning, a lot of worst-case scenario planning. It's sort of the job. It strikes me that that's kind of what you're talking about here, except with worst-case scenario planning for something catastrophic internally.
Indeed. A few months before the last election, we had something called the Transition Integrity Project. And we had 4 scenarios. This was developed by Rosa Brooks and her team. And what we did not consider was the military having a problem within each of those scenarios. What we are asking for is to red team this. What we are asking for is to have that burst of imagination. What can happen and what do we do about it? And that's the war game component that I think that we need to see the nation do about 2 years before the actual election coming up in 2024.
I wonder, General, obviously you co-wrote this op-ed with 2 other retired folks. If this is a topic of conversation in the circles in which you operate, if the aftermath of January 6th, of the shock of it, the surprise of it, the possibility of further democratic erosion, and watching that as an explicit project of certain actors, if that's just something that is circulating a lot in the circles you run in.
Chris, here's the thing. All of us know men and women who we trusted. They are our friends. They may be our family members. And they are infected by this GOP message that the election was stolen. We all have these people. And we all know that they're smart enough to know better. But for some reason, this feast of fealty to Donald Trump has just compromised the intellect and the wisdom of so many Americans. We have a failure to imagine, and we've got to fix that.
It's a very, very profound point, and personal. And I know that I've even spoken with former colleagues of Michael Flynn, who have a very hard time squaring the individual they see now and the things he says with the man they served with. And I know there's a lot of people that feel that way about a lot of other different folks. And I appreciate you taking some time. Major General Paul Eaton, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.